Student. Yeah. Good morning and welcome back to the Pillars Conference. I hope you enjoyed your break. Before we begin with our next session, just a quick reminder, we will be using the same Zoom link all day. If you need to sign out for any reason, just use the same link in your email. You'll be right back in. If you have any technical difficulties during the presentation, please drop us a line in the chat. And if you have questions for the presenters, please submit them to the Q&A located at the bottom of your screen. All attendees are expected to follow the Pillars Code of Conduct, which will be added to the chat shortly. To summarize, please treat all staff, event attendees, and speakers with respect. Those who are not adhering to the Code of Conduct will be removed from the webinar. And keeping an eye out for the conference evaluation, which will be shared throughout the day, we ask that you please fill it out. Now please enjoy our next session, teaching about AI, not just with AI, bypassing the cheating issue.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Betsy.
How are
So we're just
you?
gonna, I'm good, I'm good. So we're gonna do like a podcast style conversation. This is gonna be like a deep dive, like Notebook LM always likes to say.
That's
So we're
great.
just gonna jump right in and have fun. I'm gonna share a link in the session in the chat for everyone. So that's just kind of a link to a lot of the resources that we're talking about here. So
Hey, Chris. First
yeah,
thing, as a podcast and podcaster, should we do like a little brief introduction? Like, who are
we
you?
We probably should. So I'm Dr. Christopher Harris. I'm the director of the school library system for Genesee Valley BOCES. We serve 22 small rural school districts, about 20,000 students, a little bit southwest of Rochester. I'm also a senior policy fellow with the American Library Association, working with their public policy and advocacy office on mainly youth, school, technology type issues. What about you, Betsy?
Well, I'm Betsy Hartnett, and I'm the school library system director at DCMO BOCES, which is in Norwich, New York. Kind of, if you drew a triangle between Utica, Binghamton, and Syracuse, Norwich would be like right in the center. We have 16 rural districts for the most part, and I'm also our assistant director for instructional technology. So I like to combine my two roles into really kind of making all of our librarians their instructional technology coaches in the buildings.
Great. Well, let's jump right into this deep dive. We've got the
Okay.
resources lined up and shared, and let's talk AI and our scope
Okay.
and sequence and cheating and everything.
Well, all right. First of all, tell me about this title that I'm going to say you came up with a title. So tell me about it. Like teaching about AI, not just with AI, bypassing the cheating issue. So, what do you mean by all of that?
Well, one of the big things that I focus on is demystifying AI, really making sure that people understand how AI tools work, that they understand the technology behind it. I worry that sometimes we jump right into talking about teaching with AI. We jump right into tools, and there's some great tools out there. I think of like Magic School, which is a great set of training wheels, but my worry is when you jump right into the tools, those training wheels get welded onto the bike. They don't come off easily later because you don't really understand what's going on with the technology. So my approach has been to start with demystifying it, to really break down what's going on, how does it work. It's mimicking human writing. It's not really generating or creating anything. It's focusing on just word predictions, what word comes next. So it's doing the same thing that your phone does, except it looks a lot more impressive because it predicts so many different words. So it's a real issue to understand that. If our goal is to get us um, to help students, to help our colleagues, to help community members, then we, as the people teaching about AI, need to understand it so that we have confidence. So that's why we really focused on those issues in our LibraryReady.AI Scope and Sequence. And I know you were part of that a little bit with the School Library Systems Association. And we're really lucky to get funding from the Allison Rosen Foundation for us to be able to sit down and bring together a set of experts from around New York State and indeed across New York State, from all the way over in Western New York to Long Island to the North Country, a couple of professors from Cornell that helped us really dive into the issues so that we could talk about all of those things. Um, I think it was so important that we looked at it as a holistic approach, not just the computer science and technology, but also media literacy and information seeking practices, how that's changing. So how have you been addressing it? What's going on in your region? How's it working?
Well, of course we have got tons and tons of professional development and workshops that we offer to our teachers. And some of our administrators really are embracing it. And I think the more that they talk about it in our meetings and they're saying, I used AI to help me make this process more efficient. That helps because then the other people it helps demystify it. It helps the other
Mhm.
administrators to see it. I give workshops that are simple, like just generative AI 101, all the way to like changing your assessments and the way you assess. And I've been into schools and gone in, and sometimes it's very well received. It's usually like a mixed bag. You get people who are like, we don't want to have anything to do with this. And then we have other people who are like, this is making my life so much better. And it's making my instruction so much
Yeah.
better and all of that. So I personally just love to go in and even just have the conversation with teachers around it because there's so many differing opinions. There's so many differing levels of comfort with it. And what about you guys? What have you been doing?
Man, I like to say, the WIFM is strong with this, the what's in it for me, which is
Yeah,
so important in adult learning.
yeah,
We've got to start the adults where they are, hit them and show them what's the benefit to them for learning about this. I think about all the different technology rollouts that I've been part of in education over my 27 years in education now, and about 25 in instructional technology in school libraries and stuff. And I think back to like even our one-to-one rollouts. They were slow to adopt. It was tough. There was a lot of resistance, but for the most part, the teachers, when we talk to them about AI, administrators, they see what's in it for them. What's really fascinating is the conversation that comes next. The whole, they see it as working smarter and they love working smarter. And then
yeah.
I say, well, then why is it cheating if your students are using the same tools that you're using to make your job easier? And that leads to some fascinating conversations.
Yes, it sure does. So I guess we should just address, the elephant in the room. I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm hearing from teachers anyway, is that they are not sure how to navigate teaching when the assessment piece of it is up in the air. Like they're like, well, how is this going to stop students from cheating? They just can go home and they can cheat. And what do you talk about like when you're faced with that kind of a question?
That's such a good question. I tell them there's good news and there's bad news. Um, the bad news is there's nothing we can do about it. And the good news is there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. And I kind of joke with them, but I tell them, cheaters going to cheat. They, there's always been cheating. It just this changes the level of what's possible with the cheating. But that's the first thing we really need to talk about. What I've had the best success with is especially if I'm doing a talk with a group of teachers, I call
Hmm.
out the math teachers. I look for the math teachers or the foreign language teachers, but I love talking with the math teachers. I hold them up as like the gods in the room. I'm like, you know, math teachers have dealt with this little app called Photomath. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's an app on your phone. You take a picture of your math homework and it does all the work for you. It shows you all the solution that you just copy it down with the answer and everything. That's been out for over a decade. That came out in 2014. So for a decade, the math teachers have been dealing with this. And I always love doing this live because you go up to a math teacher and just say photo math and they just roll their eyes because they've dealt with this. But remember, like when we were in high school, Betsy, and the math teachers were all like, oh God, calculators are gonna end the world. I
Right.
mean, you know, it didn't end the world. Yeah, we have a calculator in our pocket all the time now, which they told us would never come to be. But now we have ChatGPT in our pockets all the time. And so I talked to the math teachers about, well, did they stop teaching math? And they say, no, of course not. All right. Did you change how you assign and assess math work because of photo math? And then they stop and they think and they say, yes. They give fewer math problems. Man, I remember in high school getting like 20, 25 math problems. You give that many math problems to a kid today in algebra, they're like, this is crazy. They're going to pull out photo math. So
Right.
they give fewer math problems. They focus on the process of getting to the right answer, not just whether the right answer is there. Sometimes they even like give the right answer and tell the kids your whole goal is to work to the process. But New York State's been making changes too. Now I know they're not saying, and they probably didn't really do this to respond to AI and the cheating. But the new Algebra 1 exam that came out last year, there's a whole new section on that exam where the kids have to work through a series of math problems, and they get graded on the work that they do as well as the answer. So if you don't show the correct work in all the steps, you don't get full points, even if you get the answer right. And so I think that's kind of that change to the process of learning, not the product of learning. I love to talk to teachers, and I tell them, when I talk to students about AI, I always show them my favorite cheating site. It's called undetectable.ai. It's on our links list. Undetectable.ai. It shows them that these AI detectors don't work.
Yeah.
They just you might as well flip a coin and see what it comes up with. They just don't work. But we already lost the arms race because undetectable, if it comes back as AI, you can pay $60 a year. That is less than a coffee a month.
Yeah.
You're telling me some high school kid that wants to cheat's not going to pay $60 a year? It will humanize their product where it runs it through more AI filters. And the other big one that, well, you probably know coming from the tech world, the tech directors love to talk about looking at the history of the Google Doc, and you can see if they just copied and pasted everything in at once. Undetectable has something they call human typer. It slowly pastes it in a little bit at a time, so it looks like you wrote it. We can't win. And
So
I tell the
basically,
teachers,
yeah,
yeah, that's the good news is, dude, we can't win. We've already lost.
right,
So let's figure out what are we going to do. So what have you seen? What have you
right.
been working with?
No, it's so funny. I love it. Like as soon as there's a workaround, like, hey, we can block the website or do whatever, and then there's always a workaround for the students. There's always, and like, cheating is not new. I'm going to tell you, one of the things that I did in high school was sometimes, like, if I didn't have time to read the book, because usually I was reading a book that I wanted to read for pleasure, and so then I'd be assigned a book I didn't want to read, and so I might just flip through it real quick if I had the cliff notes. I'd get that. I'd write a book report. I'd pick maybe like a few paragraphs to really focus on and then write about that and put a couple quotes in. And I always did very well on that without ever actually having read the book. And when I've been into the school, and it happened to be an ELA teacher that said, well, the kids can just use AI to write their entire book report, and they're not going to even need to read the book. And I said, well, and they're like, what are we going to do about that? And I said, well, you're probably not going to like my response, and that is, you need to change the way you're assessing. So, like, throw away the book. Who wants to write a book report? Come on. There's so many different ways to interact with that text. And you can use AI to help you create assignments. You can have the kids use AI to write the assignments. But when you think about, like, Bloom's taxonomy and the triangle, there's a knowledge is at the very bottom. And one of the things I think that as teachers, we have so much trouble, even though we're told the first day of education school, you have to go towards the top of that Bloom's taxonomy. We are still going to the knowledge. Guess what? We don't need to be teaching knowledge. We need to be teaching process, thinking, analyzing, all of those things. So this, for me, the thing that excites me the most about generative AI is that our hands are forced to come up with some new assessments and new activities for students to actually use their thinking brain and not just rote like memorization. And Google's been around for a long time too. So, for any teacher to say, okay, well, this is a problem with cheating, it really isn't. It's not about cheating, but it's going to help us create new ways to have the students get into some deeper level thinking skills.
I think that's so important,
Yeah.
Betsy. But it's not just the assessments that we give to students. What I especially like to talk with ELA teachers about is that we need to respect the students' work as well. And I think um, like those book reports you talked about, or just those ridiculous write an essay on this. And we expect the kids to put time into them, right? We want them to spend like days, hours over days writing these things. And then what do they get back? They get back like a paper with a few like commas circled in red and a good job on the top. And like where's the level of respect back to our students as learners? Like if we're asking them to put in hours and hours of work, and all we're doing is circling some grammatical errors and not focusing at all on the top of that triangle that you talked about, how do we justify what we're doing, the attention, if we're not giving the same amount of attention to the assessment and the understanding that we expect to give to our students, then that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and just as I think that you can kind of, especially after a few times of working with one of the generative AI, you can kind of start picking up on the language that it's going to be using. And the same with like if you use a generative AI to provide feedback to the students, it's kind of going to be doing the same thing. But some people have said that using generative AI is now making our brains a little bit uh, not as thinking as well. I think it's one of those articles that you might have shared. Is it
Yeah, it's in
called
our resources link. There was an MIT study, right?
right that your brain on ChatGPT, it's accumulation of cognitive debt. It's saying that it's making us weaker writers. What are your thoughts on that?
It's not a new concept. I remember, well, again, it's what the math teachers told us about our over reliance on calculators, and that would be the end of our understanding about math if we didn't learn how to do long division by hand. But I know that their teachers told them, well, those slide rules are going to, be the death of you. You won't be able to think. I mean, we heard about it with GPS, and like you don't know how to give directions or drive anywhere. I don't know about that. I think I still get around okay. What I will say, I think where I really think about it is, do you remember when GPS first came out? There were all those crazy news stories about people that like drove into lakes or they
Yeah,
turned down railroad tracks, and they said, well, the computer told me to do it. I'm
right.
like, come
Right.
on, but aren't you the human in the mix here? Aren't you the person that's supposed to be, making this better decision? So I read that article and I thought it was interesting, and I really see the concern, but I think that's why, we really focus so much in the LibraryReady.AI Scope and Sequence on this idea of being the human in the loop still,
Mhm.
that you still need to review and critically think about everything that AI spits out. The US Department of Ed said, treat it less like a robot vacuum cleaner, more like an electric bike. If you're out there riding an electric bike, and oh my gosh, I see kids on their way to school. They don't have bikes, they have the electric scooters, and they're like on their phone on the scooter. I'm like,
Yeah,
are you not watching out for potholes and stuff? Come on, you're going to wreck on that.
I
So
know.
I
I
think
know.
if we're still the human in
Yeah.
thinking about it, um, I think it's something we've always heard before. It's that moral panic over novels that preceded the moral panic over comic books. You know, some of it's just change is scary, but I think there are concerns based on how we use AI, which is why I focus so much always on that teaching about AI, not just
Mhm.
with AI. It's that critical approach. It's that skeptical thought about it. That's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm seeing in the chat, Mary Carroll shared out a link to New Yorker. Um, this new article they put out about the end of the essay. And yeah, I mean, we've been hearing about this for a long time. New York State is moving forward with this whole New York Inspires and the end of the Regents exam, and
Right.
moving to this what they call PBL, which we used to think, and talk about as project-based learning. But I love what New York State did because they're calling it performance-based learning and assessment.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you? How do you see as the difference? What does performance-based learning and assessment mean in an AI world?
Right. I mean, well, because we've always had performance-based assessments for, say, music and art, right? That's
Foreign
performance-based,
language.
foreign language. So how does that translate to some of our other subject areas, and how do we use AI for it? And those are really good questions that I think that we as educators have to move towards. But what I love to do is just put that in as a prompt in AI. How do I make this a more of a performance-based learning? And that way we really tie in all of education together, because we can tie it into what the students are currently working on in their real life, plus actual learning experiences. Now, this is the thing I like about generative AI, is that as educators, we're already so full. There's so much on our plate. Like, to think about how we're going to do project-based learning and performance-based learning is really hard. But using AI, and I've been in, and I like to put it in, and I think, wow, this is actually better than something I could come up with. And sometimes I'm like, I can't come up with some really fun things. But there's some great things that I've done that where, like, a student might have to write a script about Romeo and Juliet, just for an example, and then write that script about the two, and then put it into a generative AI to assess it, or vice versa. Have generative AI create that script, and then a student needs to point out, if is this a conversation that those characters would actually have? Is there something about the setting, or the time period? So really thinking about the novel, and not just coming up with a summary and one page to think about, really having to understand multiple pieces about it. I'm very excited about the New York Inspires, because it also is allowing our students to kind of craft their own pathways to how they want to learn. And I think that's really important as far as engagement goes with our students. And I'm hoping it really kind of invigorates our teachers as well as our students. Um, and then I wanted to say, well, I just wanted to touch right back real quick about the human loop thing, because I've done a lot of work with policy in schools, and using AI policy, et cetera. But one of the things I really love, I've read some policies that have been written actually for industry. And one of the lines in the policy is, the last hands to touch this are human hands, and the
Mm.
human has to go through it. Like, you would never put something out that hasn't been reviewed by a human. And so that's one of the things I really like. What about you? What are you
Yeah,
thinking? Yeah.
it's a great point. When I look at the changes that we have to make, it's big, it's tough, and it's going to be really difficult. That's one of the things that worries me about this kind of AI rollout and adoption, is if we just make those surface changes where we just start teaching with AI, and we don't really understand what it is, how it works, and the changes that it's bringing to the world, we're not going to address the underlying issues, like this assessment, like the attention gap, the
Yeah.
deficit of teacher time on student learning, in terms of assessment. I think those are underlying issues that are going to be, they're going to come back to bite us. I shared an article with you. I don't know if you had a chance to read it. Talk is cheap,
Oh,
and
yes.
it's in our link list. Man, that was a hard hitting article. This is from some professors out of Australia,
Yeah.
and they do not pull their punches. They really dive right in and say, um, if we are thinking that using these things like the AI, stoplights, if we think that that's going to actually limit student behavior, or cause changes to student work, we're pretty naive. I mean, there are no punches pulled there. It reminds me of the New Yorker article um, that came out a month or two ago about just the I mean, I don't know how else to put it, but the dumpster fire that is AI and concern over AI in higher ed. There is so much worry and concern going on there. But they went and talked to a bunch of students, and they talked about, especially for online learning, how they were using Gen AI to answer like the tell us a little bit about yourself and why you are taking this course. I'm like, if they're cheating on the intro assignment, I mean, but it's not a great assignment. It's kind of like so I look at that and I think, I kind of see why they're doing it, because why wouldn't they? But this talk is cheap article, man, they say what we have to do is we have to get away from these uh, discursive changes, and we really have to focus on these structural changes that we're talking about, this performance-based learning kind of stuff. Discursive changes would be, telling like, and I caught the end of Alyssa's talk, and I'm there. Like, I love me an AI stoplight, but I think we have to use it as a starting point and not expect integrity from students. And I hate to say that. I hate to say that we can't trust our students, but the problem is there's absolutely no way to verify. So if we're really using this for assessments, it's tough. Now, a way around it, and what I've talked to teachers about is saying, look, if you want to make it that red, that no AI usage allowed, if you want to make a red on the stoplight for an assignment, then take away all the penalty. Make it a formative assessment. With formative assessments like homework, things that students are doing, should never be graded. So if you want to make it a red where you're telling them, I don't want you to use AI, then don't grade it. No risk, and just be upfront with the students, and again, shift to the process and say, hey, this is for me to understand as the teacher where you are, and for you to understand as the student what you know and what you can do. So we're both going to look at this work that you're doing and see where you are in your learning journey as we
Yeah.
work towards these sort of indicators of success. So take away the risk, and otherwise, it's naive to think that any student work that they go away and are doing on their own or online stuff, we we can't tell. So I love they talk a lot about the structural changes, that whole performance-based learning. Um, I love that approach, because then we can really say, look, it's okay if you use AI to gain your learning. It's okay if you used AI to outline something, because at the end of the day, if we're going to do for these big assignments, if we're going to do like a dissertation style defense, if we're going to do a performance, a conversation, then you're going to have to internalize the learning. You're going
Yeah.
to have to really truly understand the topic and what you've studied. And so if AI helped you to that point, that's okay, because you're still having to have internalized and perform it. Now I see
Yeah.
someone wrote in the chat that if there's no grade, then students won't care and won't bother. I know. That's the real challenge. And I faced this. I had a year after COVID where I got to run an online learning program, and it's tough. How do you build that intrinsic desire to learn and succeed? And it's really difficult. But I think we've established a culture where everything is extrinsic, where it's oh, you have to get these for points, you have to do this or I'm going to give you a zero and fail you, and it's
Yeah.
all like penalty based. And
Right.
if we can flip the script on that, but again, this is like a big change to education, flipping the script. But otherwise, I don't I agree with this article, this talk is cheap article. I don't see any other way to avoid the issue of cheating. Cheaters gonna cheat. And it's so, you know, low effort now. You talked about Bloom's taxonomy. Well, the
Yes.
problem is like Wikipedia and stuff and Google searches, we're down at that knowledge level, but
Uh-huh.
generative AI is up here at the top of Bloom's taxonomy. And in fact, maybe doing more of that analysis than our students are comfortable doing themselves if we don't prepare them. And
Well,
so I think that's the difference.
I have to stop you because you keep saying cheating and you used another word, integrity. And I have to say, you know what? I disagree with you. Like, these are tools that students are using. So when we say integrity, I'm going to say, you know what? Ask better questions, because if I don't feel like answering, talk about myself, um, you know, first job interview question is usually like, tell me about yourself. It's like, well, like, I was born in Houston, lived there till I was 3. Like, that's a stupid question. Tell me something, let's ask some better questions and get students thinking. The other thing I want to say is, okay, so the way that my own son learns is he watches all these YouTube videos about how to do this and how to do that and how to do that. And then he comes to me and he just wants to tell me about everything he learned. And mom, you won't believe this, but da 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 da. My usually question is, well, do you have, did you check your facts? Because that's usually like, did you check this? But what about a student? What about students who, like, that's what they want? They want to learn using TikTok. And then can they do that? Is that something that we can now allow? And then have a student maybe want to, instead of doing a paper about it, they could just do a video about it like this and just talk about it. And this is what I learned. And then maybe the teacher can come back and say, so, but how do we know this is true, right? Because another thing we've talked about is media literacy. Is that
Yep.
separate from AI, or do they go hand in hand?
I don't think we're as far apart. Really, yes, I talk about cheating because that's the vernacular that the teachers understand and they use. But I agree, they're great tools. I guess my approach is, we need to make sure that the teachers understand that these tools are out there. They can't stop access, and it's very difficult to have oversight into whether or not the students use these tools. And so if we're going to have an expectation that students aren't using these tools, we need to understand that there's no way to verify.
Yeah.
So it's a real challenge. And we've got some interesting comments in the chat there. Have you been following that as well?
No,
Um,
I can't. I can only do one thing at a time. Sorry.
I'm like, oh, all over the place because I'm crazy like that. And I love this take that, someone had to do that peer review assignment in college where they had to check over somebody's, and it clearly, she said clearly they'd taken the AI or the article and run it through AI to put it in your own words. But I feel like, yeah, but isn't that kind of what we tell kids to do anyway? Is read the article and put it in your own words. That's why I love that undetectable.ai website, because it is so unabashedly, unapologetically like, hey, we're going to help you just do this. You know what frustrates me are all those, like, there's a bunch of AI detection websites that try and sell themselves to teachers like, we'll help you detect if AI was used. But then, like, up in the top bar, they also say, well, not only are we part of the problem, or part of the solution, but they also have the problem where they have like an AI tool to put it in your own words. Like, you're creating the problem and the solution. That's conflict of interest. Come on now.
Right? That's a
Transparency is
good
huge.
business model. Let's create the
Yeah.
problem and the solution, and then we can just sell the solution to the problem we've already created. It's a great idea.
Transparency is huge, as Jennifer notes. That if the teachers are expecting the students not to use AI, they better not be using AI themselves. And I think that, especially in higher ed, the teachers or students are really getting upset about that. I've seen a number of stories about things going on where they're very upset. I worry about that here in New York State. We've got the cell phone ban in schools coming up when school comes back in September. But if the teacher's up front with his or her cell phone out and is on their phone, telling the kids, like, get off your phone or I'm going to take it, like, that's not going to fly. And it's the same thing. It's like, and there was a great article. I didn't put it in our resources list, opinion piece in the Herkimer report. It's the whole thing that teachers see the AI tools as working smarter, but then they think the kids are cheating when they use the same tools.
Yeah.
And I think we have to have that parity, and respect. So yeah,
Yeah.
those social annotations and discussions are great, but those are the kinds of things that if we talk about that flipped classroom and blended learning, the learning can take place in a personalized environment. If the student wants to learn from YouTube videos or TikTok, or having a Socratic conversation with an AI tool is such a great way to learn, because you can ask all the follow-up questions. And then class time is devoted to those meaty conversations between humans as we explore what this really means, and where we're thinking about it. And then if we want to know how kids are doing, like going back to, you talked about the ELA teachers. If you want to know if a kid can write, you give them a 15-minute quick writing class. Whether it's pencil and paper, or if they need, accommodations or something. But in 15 minutes, you will be able to assess every single writing standard from the ELA standards, and
Yeah.
and you'll know exactly where they are. And so I
Yeah.
think that's really important.
I think you
So
make
hey,
like a great, oh, sorry. I was just gonna
you know,
say, I think you make like a great point about like we've learned what our businesses have asked for. And you know what they don't need? They don't need the kids to know facts about World War I, but they do need them to be able to think, communicate, work collaboratively, like all these things that I think that we're gonna start moving away from. Not that teaching history is something we shouldn't do. We do. It's just that we don't need the kids to memorize the dates and the names. We need them to be able to understand and explain the big concepts, right? And
yep,
that's something too that I think that this AI is helping us move towards.
with a
um
strong dose of media literacy to make sure
oh,
that
yes,
information that's coming out of the AI is accurate. I was
yes,
playing around with there's an open source AI tool at Allen.ai, and they let you kind of trace back where the content comes from. Because the AI is just predicting words. It's mimicking human writing by predicting words in patterns that are statistically more prominent. And
yes,
and and what the AI Gen AI tools do is they find phrases, and then they fill in words around those phrases, and they look for sourcing the phrases to make sure that they're mimicking human speech. And I was looking on Allen.ai, and I asked it a really tough question about sort of the background of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Really sensitive topic, I know, but it's one where we can really do a lot of analysis and assessment of an AI tool, and check for bias, check for, how it's answering it.
yeah.
You can trace the sources though. One of the sources I started looking at, it was some anti-Semitic rant. I mean, it was like crazy conspiracy theory stuff that started with like, well, Adolf Hitler's real name was. I'm like, whoa, where did this even come from? Why was this in the data set that the AI was
Right.
looking? And why did the AI pick that to do any informing for what it was doing? That was really frightening. And then a bunch of the other sources were from like Tumblr links. And yeah, I mean, I'm not attacking Tumblr, but that's not where I want to go for like nuanced international relations conversations. Kind of know your source. So, media literacy, that's why it's all wrapped up together in our
Yes,
AI scope and sequence. When we talk about this, we've got to have it
right.
all in there.
It's so important that, and again, that human loop piece, like, did you check those sources, and what do those other sources say? And and then you're talking just right about media literacy, information literacy, the whole thing, how so important for our librarians to be on the forefront of all of this. But what do you say to people, educators or administrators or librarians, who are like, nope, we're not addressing AI at all? It's bad for the environment, because I noticed that's what Alyssa talked a little bit about, or somebody brought that up while she was in there. Copyright issues, plagiarism, all of these things. What do you say to those people who are like, you know what, I'm just against it in general, so we're not going to address it in my school?
I was involved in a conversation on the AASL forum on the ALA Connect platform. And one of my, very esteemed colleagues, who I have great respect for, said, if you're talking about AI and teaching kids about AI, you are complicit in the data theft.
Oh,
Oof,
wow.
yeah. And I came back and said, wait a second, it's out there. As Alyssa said, the genie's out of the bottle. We've got to talk about. Where I went, Betsy? Because
Ooh,
I get a little
yeah.
controversial out there sometimes. Um, I pushed back and said we cannot have an abstinence-only AI approach. That we have got to have a comprehensive AI education approach.
Yes.
AI is out there, kids are using it. We know from all the research that abstinence only sexual education doesn't work, it doesn't help, it leads to harm. But we made this mistake with social media. I was in the field when social media came out. We blocked everything. We put our heads in the sand and pretended it didn't exist. We didn't talk about it, we didn't teach about it, we didn't prepare parents and our communities for it. We cannot make the same mistake with AI. We have got to be talking to our kids about safe, ethical use. Um, we've got to talk to parents about it. You want to talk about, dealing with this issue of cheating and stuff, talk to the parents. Help them see that, they're the ones that can help their kids stay motivated. Um, Talking about all of these real, mental health issues around AI that it's so sycophantic. We're seeing our young girls with the image manipulation that goes on in our camera phones, with the filters on TikTok that just change everything. There's huge issues there with our young boys, with our teen boys. They're getting sucked into these character.ai and the like, these interactions with character-driven chatbots where AI is sycophantic. It does what you tell it to do. And if they get sucked into this like men's right, these incel based approaches, these very
Mhm.
negative, like Andrew Tate stuff, they're starting
Yeah.
to have these really like freaky conversations where they're getting freaky and sexual with these AI chatbots in a way that's very violent. And the chatbots, because they're AI chatbots and are sycophantic, they're responsive, they're welcoming and affirming this sexual violence. And I think there's real danger to that. Now look, there are some real potentials around using AI for mental health conversations, but there are real concerns as well. It needs to be in a carefully monitored chatbot. It needs to not be off the rails. It needs to not be, leading to all these dangerous issues. And so I think we need to talk a lot more about it. So yeah, we need to be talking with communities and parents and families and everything. I dropped in our AI resources link. I dropped like just one of my slide decks. I try to make sure I give everything away that I do. And so it's customizable. It'll take you right into, I'm sorry, it's Keynote. It's on the Mac Keynote. You can download it as a PowerPoint and have fun changing the fonts around and making it look nice again. I'm sorry, I'm a Mac guy, but it's there with full presenter notes and all the resources, and you have full Creative Commons license to do it. I've been doing a lot of these out in public libraries and family nights at schools. I think it's so important that we really talk about it. For the environmental, I think Alyssa addressed that nicely. The real issue, look, if you're not fighting even harder to block cryptocurrency, that is way more destructive on the environment than your AI usage.
Yes,
So
I agree.
let's have the real conversations.
Well, I mean, and there's so many, I'm not saying like, let's ruin the environment, but there are so many different things that have the environmental impact, that a negative environmental impact, that we need to address completely. Like this, I'm not saying we shouldn't be addressing it, but that shouldn't stop us. That we can address it at the same time while we're instructing with it, about it, and everything. So, I do respect the environment. Look at my background. See, I took that picture this morning. Um, anyway, so I think that is. I feel like we're coming towards the end of our time here. I can't remember exactly. Do you remember what time
Got
it's
about 15 minutes. And so I
15?
know, yeah, we were going to talk a little bit about policy, but I also want to make sure that we address some of these comments and questions. We just had a question come into the Q&A. So y'all join in. This is like that new
Yeah.
beta studio feature of Notebook LM where you can ask a question of we're just here like the AI spitting all this out based on everything that we've ingested. Um, so drop it into chat, drop it into QA. We're going to address questions. There have been some interesting conversations going on in the chat as well, where folks are talking about, sort of that issue of art classes. Yeah, we're going to have to really look at the whole media issue is changing the media landscape and the writing
Yeah.
landscape as well. And there's a lot of difficult conversations there.
Well, another thing, so I think the first question in the chat is talking a little bit about how some of our vendors are integrating AI and how, is that happening in K-12 as well? You know what, I think it's happening everywhere. That's one thing I talk about when I go into schools and stuff, is like talk about integrated generative AI. When you Google something, that's exactly what you get. And you get a lot of responses. Now, again, here's where the human impact comes. You have to go back and look through to make sure those sources are the right sources. But sometimes I Google, like I Dr. Google a question, like, hey, Dr. Google, what is this? But now it compiles some like a kind of a summary from a bunch of different sources. And then I can say, okay, this is what the Mayo Clinic is saying, and this is what PubMed saying. So I think it's integrated AI is something that's not only in K-12, the vendors, yes, everywhere it is going. What about you?
Hey, look, I get a little I get a little negative about this sometimes because I worry that everybody's just slapping that, now with AI sticker on all their products. And it's like, okay, but not every product needs to have AI. And in a lot of cases, it's not AI, it's just an algorithm. So whatever. I do think there are some really cool things that we can do. One of the things that my team has done, we actually bought what's called like an AI factory. So it's a desktop computer. It's a Mac Studio actually that we specified, especially to be powerful at running AI models. So we are running a full stack AI model right on the desktop. So this is like the full version basically of ChatGPT, an open source version. I think right now we're running one of the Llama models that
Yeah.
comes out of Meta. But what that lets us do is we can give it the training data that we wanted to use. And so we're exploring, there's the LLM, the large language model, where you give
Uh-huh.
it lots and lots and lots of stuff. But one of the newer things in AI research is this concept of a small language model. Because if I'm developing a tool for, like elementary students,
Hmm.
they don't need to have all the information from the world in their large language model. That's where you lead to issues. The question talks about those tight guardrails. So if you give it limited information and more guardrails, you're able to build that up. So I've actually been thinking I want to talk to some of our vendor partners and see about getting access to like their book catalog,
Yeah.
their full corpus of books, and feed that into an AI model and develop that as a sort of resource where it can be more trusted. Because you talked about those AI overviews, but I know like the Google one, sometimes you look at the sites that it was doing and they're just, they're the pay to play kind of like, content farm sites. I'm like, well, wait a second, Google, come on. I want to make sure
Correct.
it's accurate sites and accurate information. So that's the media literacy thing. But it's so important to look at that. So yeah, that's a big thing. But yeah, we need to think about why we're using AI, what AI does, things that are good tasks for AI tools, and things that are not good tasks for AI tools.
Yes.
And so I have to talk to administrators a lot about that because they say, well, can it help me do a master schedule? Like, well, maybe, but a word prediction generative AI tool is not the right algorithm for developing a master schedule. You need a different algorithm. You need more of a pathing algorithm, not a word prediction algorithm. And so we have to make sure we're using the right tool. So we do have to be very technologically aware about sort of the back end stuff as well.
Well, that really, like, it leads into the question in the chat from Brianna, which is about what like resources and tools do you like or avoid? Is there anything like the media bias chart? And then I was going to ask you, as far as like Magic School AI, did they use some kind of a small language model for that, or what do you like? And then I could tell you my opinion if you're interested.
My understanding of Magic School is they're using an API they were using OpenAI, so ChatGPT. They might have switched to Gemini, I'm not sure, but they're just using an API with some back-end tuning, fine-tuning, and guardrails limiting, which can be very productive. So a lot of this is there's this concept called RAG, resource augmented generation, where you're looking and saying, okay, use your LLM, the large language model, to give me like the word prediction stuff, but all the content should be drawn from this set of resources, like Notebook LM does, where it's just limited to the resources that you give it. I think that's a real powerful type of tool, and we need to be looking at things like that. Someone in the chat said, well, who decides what information? I think that's a library type job.
Yeah.
That's where librarians should be making sure that the trusted content is in there. Right now it's like everything. And I think that really shows when you start digging deep into these language models and seeing, like, everything is in there and everything online is not great. And so we have real issues. But anytime we limit the data, that's a chance to introduce bias. And so we have to be careful as well. Are there any ways to rank? There are some tests out there. I don't have the links to hand, but I know there are some tests out there that really look at bias,
Hmm.
and that look at any types of concerns in terms of bias responses in answers. And so there are some tools that are trying to assess that and look at that. It's still pretty early days. A big concern I had back during the election time, Google got really burned on a lot of their responses. And for quite a while there during the election and after, they had imposed some stop words that they weren't allowing, so you couldn't ask any prompt about Trump, not even like, hey, how do I take a trick and bridge using a Trump? It would say that's a political thing and we're not going to address it. But there were also stop words, like Israel and Palestine were two stop words. It would not address at all. And so, for a while there, I was trying to show librarians, hey, let's evaluate the response. And so we would look at, ChatGPT, we looked at Claude, and then we looked at Google Gemini that just said, hey, I won't address this whatsoever. And we talked about kind of the issues there. You said you had some good tools?
Well, not tools really. I just have my own opinions. That's a good tool right there. No, I feel like, we talked a little bit about prompt engineering and writing the right prompt and all of that, which I don't think that there is because these things are about chatting, right? It's about not just developing the right prompt, but to go back and forth until you get the correct information that you need.
I think we built up this prompt engineering, and like people get scared and they
Yeah,
overthink it.
yeah,
And I keep telling them, don't overthink it. Just tell it exactly what you want it to do. And like
right.
the best thing you can do, the old Big Six research model. Remember what number one in the Big Six was? Understand the problem. For teachers, I tell it, treat it like you're a teacher, it's a student, and you're assigning homework. Be direct and explicit with what you want it to do. For librarian, treat it like a reference interview. What's the actual problem or question that you're addressing? That's all you have to do. That's the best prompt you can come up with.
And when you get something wonky back, don't blame the model, just
Yeah,
ask it a different question, ask it a
yeah.
different way, ask it to revise based on the additional information. I like that you can now attach like articles and multiple articles, websites, everything, so that you can say, hey, I want something that looks like this model right here, but I want it with this information. Because remember, it's also generative, but that chatting piece is so hard. And sometimes I think like with Magic School AI, it's also kind of just pre-written prompts. Like you want a lesson plan. Okay, we've pre-written the prompt. You're just going to plug in da, 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 and it goes in. And so, one of the things is not being a great prompt writer, but being like a librarian, exactly like you said. Like, let's get to the heart of the problem and what we're actually asking it to do, and then keep going. It's not just a one and done. It's a chat.
Yeah. So we've got about 7 minutes left, and I
Okay.
want to go back to the chat because I don't see anything else in Q&A. But in the chat, Jess posted a question. How receptive have students been to the problems with AI? And Julia gave it a +1 because I think that's a huge thing. What do you think? Have you had a lot of conversations with students? Are
Um,
they aware of? Like,
Well,
how are they using AI?
in our role, we don't actually work directly with students, but I work with teachers who work directly with students. And one of the things that I've encouraged them to do, I mean, what a great inquiry model this is. Ask them about, let's have a debate about whether we should be using it. Is it good? We know it's bad for the environment. Do the benefits outweigh the negatives? Like, this is another way to get students to actually learn a little bit more about AI and generative AI, is to have them think about these kinds of concepts, those problems with it. Is the bias bad enough where we shouldn't continue to use it? Or is it where, if we use it, we always need to use it with caution? Or so I think, like, getting the students to think about it also helps them understand the how it works.
Yeah, I agree. I have done some student presentations where districts have asked me to come in and talk to students.
Oh, cool.
Um, I will tell you, like, if you ask a group of students who's used AI, like, all the hands are up. They're
Yeah,
all using it. If you ask them, okay, who's used AI to do their homework, like, maybe a couple hands go down, but most of them stay up and they say, well, the teachers don't know. I'm like, yeah, they do, because I'm telling them, just, you know, they know, they can tell. When all of a sudden your writing changes from struggling seventh grader to graduate level, they can tell.
yeah, yeah,
When you get all your homework right, but you fail the test, you can tell. Just like your foreign language, your Spanish teacher, they always knew if the kid was using Google Translate because they got to the test and turns out they don't know any Spanish. They can tell.
right.
So it's really a fascinating thing. What's scary is, like, I talked with some sixth graders, and I said, hey, the big thing is don't be getting freaky with the AI. And their response was, which is sixth grader for, we're getting freaky with the AI and we know we shouldn't, but you caught us. They it's out there. It's the good and the bad. Are they aware of the problems? No, because we haven't talked about it with them. And it's that whole social media thing. If we don't talk about it, if we don't talk about, the filters on TikTok, if we don't talk about, that with your phone camera, what you get out of your phone camera is no longer what you saw. There's no photographic evidence anymore like that from your phone camera. It's crazy. We've got to talk about it explicitly. This is a thing for counselors. This is, and this is all embedded in the LibraryReady.AI Scope and Sequence. We have a lot about this in there, from pre-K. Really talking about what is AI, how does it impact our lives, where is it around us in our lives. I think it's going to be, if we start addressing it now, it can be a self-correcting problem over the next few years. I think if we start taking an approach, at a more, AI positive approach to our instruction and changing education, then maybe in 10 years we'll have some changes in higher ed. But I think right now it's going to be hard to teach the kids that are living through the change and really make a
Yeah,
lot of difference, because we're still, as the leaders, the adults, we're still understanding and coming to terms with it. We're still,
yeah.
building the plane as we fly it, as they say. And so I think it's tough.
Yeah, I think too, some teachers are afraid to even address it because, it's intimidating to think the kids know more about this than I
Yep.
do. And, what would you say to that kind of a teacher? Like, I don't want to address it because kids know more about it than I do.
It's a good place to stop because it circles us all the way back to where we began, which is demystifying and, starting with that deep understanding of teaching about AI, not just with AI, so that the teachers feel confident in their ability to use it and understand it. We know we can get them in with the WIFM, the what's in it for them, as
Mhm.
a tool to help make their jobs easier. But then we've got to hit them with the understanding, the demystification, and the about AI so that they have confidence to lead instruction with their students, so that students are ethical, productive users of AI moving forward. Hey, Betsy, we are like right at time. This has been a great conversation. And, in closing words,
Um, well, I mean, I think I could talk about all the controversies and everything about it all day. So, I don't know. What about you? Any closing words? Any thoughts? Like, just look at that, the curriculum that was developed. I'd love to hear, people who are using it. Would love to hear some feedback on it. And then maybe we can
Yeah.
talk Rosen into building a little data set for a small language model.
I'm going to see what we can do. All right, it's a constantly changing field, so feel free to reach out to us. Both of our contact information are on that resources page, and thank you very much for this opportunity for us to chat.
Thank you so much, Chris and Betsy. This was fantastic. It was a great conversation, and I think we had a lot of great questions during this conversation, and fantastic points were raised. Now it's going to be time for lunch, and I encourage everyone to go outside, get some fresh air. We will reconvene at 1 for the next session. Practical AI lessons from an academic librarian's journey. And there's also going to be a link in the chat for evaluation, as I reminded you throughout the day. So please make sure you fill that out and enjoy your lunch.